Welcome to my favourite books of 2024 wrap-up video. I just went to my bookcase this time and I kind of just pulled out books that really have left an imprint on my heart, books that I think I will go back to again and again, books that I want to recommend to people, books that I will buy for people. Those are my top books of 2024 that I'm going to share with you today. It was hard to keep this group of books small because I have had an excellent reading year, and I think there's a few reasons for that. And the first reason is that I have been quite selective with the books that I've read. I have challenged myself and I have read new authors, I've read new subjects, new genres. I have tried not to get too caught up in what BookTok and all that sort of stuff is reading, because I know that a lot of the times I have read those books and they just haven't fit for me. So I've been very calculating, I guess, in if I have picked up something that is a little bit trendy, there is a specific reason for it. I have tried not to get onto that bandwagon too much. The other thing is that I have not been afraid to DNF a book. If I have not been into a book, I have not been afraid to just put it to the side. And so my Storygraph or Goodreads actually looks quite good because I'm not going to push through and give a book a 1-star rating on something that I know I am not enjoying. It just doesn't make any sense. And why do that to an author? Why give them a bad rating on a book that I am not enjoying? It might be that I come back and try it again in the future, but those are a couple of reasons I think why I have had a good year this year. I also read a few books this year from authors that I have already read previously and I really know I loved. For example, Daphne du Maurier, Benjamin Myers, Jennifer Saint, Claire Keegan. There was a good chance I was going to enjoy their latest or the most recent book that I had gotten of theirs. But I was also introduced to new authors that I had never either heard of before or just hadn't picked up their book for whatever the reason was, and I picked them up, and there are some authors that I love and I will be picking up their entire back catalogue. I will be picking up their future books. So that was a really exciting outcome. So let's get into the books, because that's what you're here for. So part of my children's book collection or project this year was to read Winnie the Pooh, and this book is most definitely a highlight for me this year. This is the first book of the Winnie the Pooh collection. I think there are 6 books. I've read 3 of them so far and I most definitely will keep reading them, but this one is an absolute highlight. This was a 5-star read for me this year. Sometimes a book just meets you at the right place in your life, and that's where this book was for me this year. I needed some gentle reading, bedtime reading, post-surgery back in March this year, and Winnie the Pooh was sitting there just waiting to be read. So I read that after I'd had some surgery in March. And it was just perfect. It just gave me some warm, fuzzy feelings. It wasn't complicated. It's a little bit akin to watching, like a 30-minute sitcom when you don't want to get too invested in something, but you want something that is going to make you feel good, give you a little bit of a laugh, give you a little bit of a moral outcome to a story. That's how I likened this, and that's what it gave me. So it met me at the right time in my life, and I really, really enjoyed it. The illustrations in here from E.H. Shepard are just exquisite. It's just so beautifully laid out. The illustrations are nostalgic. If you grew up with Winnie the Pooh, you will most definitely be transported back to that moment in your life. And the story is beautiful. A. Milne's writing is just so simple and yet has so much depth to it. I don't know how he did it. And I would love to pick up some of his more adult-based writing, even some of his mystery writing. I think there's maybe 8 chapters in here, small little stories of Pooh and his friends, and you just follow them through the 100-acre wood. And it's exactly what you'd expect in that sense. But I really do recommend it as an adult coming back to this. And then the next few books are poetry. They're really delightful. This was a highlight for me. I recommend it. I gave it 5 honey drizzled stars back then. I would still give it the stars right now, right here. It's a favorite of mine. I love it. It has that underlying message of friendship. It has adventure. I cannot wait to experience this with my grandchildren. It's beautiful. A totally different book that is most definitely in my top books of 2024 is My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier. My Cousin Rachel is a deliciously twisted novel, and I think it is du Maurier's writing. So far, the books that I have read of hers, I think it is her best writing. The pacing and the tension is excellent. And As for the story, I came out of it with so many questions that I did an entire video of a book review on this where I dove into it a little bit deeper that you are welcome to check out. I'll leave a link below. And I had so many questions about Philip, about Rachel, about their everything. And the more I think, even now when I think back on it, when I read it back in, it must have been August, I think I read it. And I think about that, Philip had red flags like a circus tent. It was unbelievable. I still feel empathetic towards Rachel. I really do. But the fact that I'm still thinking about it now for a book that was written so long ago, I think is a real testament to Maurier's writing. I think the fact that this book allows you to draw your own conclusion at the end is maybe part of that genius of Maurier. So I hope to pick up maybe Jamaica in this year to continue that reading of Maurier's writing. This book did something else for me though this year where it flipped a switch for me where I started to think about books in more of an analytical sense. It wasn't so much just about if I liked or disliked a book. Did I like or dislike the writing? Did I like or dislike the characters? I started to think about what the author was trying to tell me, what the subplot was, what the background of the characters were, all those sort of things. So I started to become a little more analytical in my thinking, and that's where that full review came from. So this book gave me that push to think a more analytical. And I really did appreciate that. And then that flowed on to other books. I don't know, it gave me a bit more of a maturity. And I think that's why I feel I have an affinity for this book still. It's absolute genius. I had a theme of books this year of women going through hard stuff in their life and finding respite and relief and answers in nature. And this was one of those books. H is for Hawk by Helen MacDonald. I had high hopes for this book. I think I first came across it on like Barack Obama's summer reading list in 2023 or 2022. There were so many amazing moments in this book. There was the writing itself, the way it flowed from Helen's grief of having lost her father through to her purchasing and raising and training a goshawk to then also talking about the life and the falconry mishaps of T.H. White, who was an author but also wanted to be a falconer back, I can't even remember what year it was now. And T.H. White published his own book called The Goshawk about his journey training a goshawk. But so it had those three elements, and so the writing flowed so well through there. But the atmosphere within each of those stories was just exquisite. Her descriptive writing of Mabel, her goshawk, and the way her reptilian movements of the bird were just magnificent. I could see Mabel jumping off the page, and how she just threw herself into this training while also trying to work through her grief for her father's death. It was really quite amazing. And the descriptions of nature and being out with Mabel, it was such a beautiful book and I really did enjoy it. It is a 5-star read for me this year. Absolutely. I will read it again. It is some of the most beautiful writing I've read and I absolutely loved it. And I don't think I'll read T.H. White's The Goshawk, but I do want to read The Once and Future King by T.H. White next year. I do want to read that. This is one of those books that I just want to, there are some books that you just want to walk around and just hold with you all the time. This is one of those books. Now, back in May, I had a stellar month, absolutely stellar month. And someone commented saying, I wonder when you look back on the end of your year, how many of your favorite books are going to be from May? Well, I can't remember who you were, but there were three. There were 3 books from May that are in this pile, and this is one of them. Graft by Maggie, Mackellar. This is another one of those books of women who are going through some stuff and find not answers, but they find relief, they find support, they find respect in the natural world. And this most definitely happens in Graft. This is a memoir as well. It is set in Tasmania on Maggie and her husband's merino farm. And it documents 1 year, so it's over 4 seasons, over 1 year of them on their farm. And they face incredibly harsh conditions over this year, which is exacerbated by one of the worst droughts they've faced in years. It is poignant, it is introspective, it is haunting, It is absolutely a marvel, and I just loved it so much when I was reading it. So we follow Maggie as she's walking, she's doing her job around the farm, and there's lambs coming into season, and there are sheep sheep seem notorious for just wanting to try and kill themselves in any way they can, and they're trying to keep this is their job, this is their livelihood. They're just trying to keep all their animals alive through this horrible drought. And so between all of the death and the birthing that she experiences on this farm, Maggie is really poetic and lyrical in her writing. She reflects on her mother and her mother having passed. And there is just the most beautiful nature writing and snippets of nature writing in here. There is also, it was quite unexpected that through here there is it ornithology? Is that the study of birds? Little definitions or explanations about birds, and then there would be little sketches of them throughout, which was quite beautiful. I really did enjoy these little moments of relief. There would be quite difficult circumstances happening for Maggie, and then at the end of the chapter there would be a bird that would be studied, and there would be a sketch that you could just rest and reflect, and there was just something so beautiful about it. But you can see how much she loves the natural world and she respects it, and it really does shine through. This is a 5-star read for me. She has done a number of books similar to this, I think, where she's talking about working on farmland, and I think I want to get hold of them as well. So yeah, this was beautiful. If you can get hold of it, I highly recommend it. It is absolutely magnificent. Now, this was a book that I picked up on a whim. One of those books where you just kind of go with your gut, you see it on the shelf and you think, oh, that looks interesting. That's an author I haven't heard of before, but it sounds interesting. And that was Drift by Caryl Lewis. I do have a bit of an MO. I do like these Irish authors, British authors, and now I like Welsh authors. Caryl Lewis is a Welsh author, and my understanding is that this is her first book that has been published in the English language, or at least written firstly in English. I think she's written a number of children's books in Welsh, but this is just beautiful. This is literary fiction with a little bit of magical realism, and it is sublime, absolutely sublime. This was a highlight for me, and I read it in the same month that I read Graft. It's a quiet, magical little novel set on the Welsh coastline, and we first meet these two siblings, Neffyn and Joseph, who live in this cottage. And Neffyn's a bit of an enigma. We know that there's something going on with her, but we're not quite sure what. Then we pick up another narrative from Hasma, who is a prisoner in the military, not too far away from where they are. And a storm comes, and these two characters, Neffyn and Hasma, are united, and then circumstances try to pull them apart. And it is just it is a tiny little book. It is very, very small, but the story is beautiful. The writing is so lovely. It is gripping, it is original. It has just the right amount of magical realism for me. There has an element of Welsh folklore in here, which is done so well that it does not distract from the plot line at all. I found it fit in so well. Absolutely beautiful. I really do hope that Caryl Lewis continues to publish in English and continues to publish adult fiction, because this was beautiful. And another book from that marvelous May, was Colm Toibin's Long Island. I also read Brooklyn this year. Brooklyn is not in this list. Long Island is, and I think that is because I already knew Brooklyn's story because I had watched the movie. I loved the book, but Long Island, this was beautiful. This was just a lovely story. It's a long-awaited sequel to Brooklyn. There's 20 years between publications, and there was 20 years for us between books. There's also 20 years in the story for our main character, Eilish, as well. If you haven't yet read Brooklyn, I'm not going to spoil anything for you, but we pick up in the book with Eilish, who receives some devastating news within the first couple of pages. And it is her reaction to that news that is the catalyst for the entire book. But the uniqueness of this book compared to Brooklyn is that we have various point of views, which makes things much more interesting. We also start to see how we meet the same characters, and even though they're much older, I guess we kind of see how they have and haven't changed over these 20 years. It doesn't feel forceful or strained. It feels like a really natural continuation of Arlish's story. And that's something you really want. There's nothing worse than having a sequel to something that you know that it wasn't needed. This was lovely. This was the sequel we never knew we needed, I guess. There's a lot of secrets, a lot of what ifs, and this drove me into picking up another couple of Colm Toibin's books this year. He's fast becoming one of my favourite writers. It is so delicate, his writing, really, really tender, and he writes women's stories exceptionally well. And I hope they are talking to Saoirse Ronan about doing a sequel, because that would be amazing. And I hope he is working on a final bookend to this to make it a trilogy. Now, something with these kind of wrap-ups is that you often get a little bit of recency bias. You know, you start to pick favourites that are books that you've just read most recently. And that was something I was very conscious of. And I'm really quite pleased that in all these books that I've read, only one have I read in the last couple of months. And that one is Dusk by Robbie Arnott. Now, the name of the book comes from the name of the puma that is being hunted in the Highlands. And initially in the book, we don't get told where the Highlands is. And I thought it might have been New South Wales, but I realise it's probably Tasmania, because that is where Robbie Arnott is. So we're probably in the Highlands of Tasmania, in colonial days Australia. But I also feel that the name Dusk is a foreshadowing of the end of something. This was my first Robbie Arnott, and I hadn't picked up his books previously because he is known for his magical realism. He's only been writing books since about 2018, or at least he's only been publishing novels since 2018. I think he was doing in journalism prior to that. And I've avoided them because of this magical realism arm on his books, and I've always kind of felt like it's just not really for me. I don't know if that side of my brain works quite so well with those books. In fact, I've DNF'd a book earlier this year that had a strong magical realism element, and I just could not wrap my head around it. You know, there were clouds talking and I just couldn't figure out the narrative. This had a magical realism element. I loved it. I will be picking up more of Robbie Arnott's books in the future. And I'm kind of kicking myself that I hadn't done it earlier. So the nature writing is exquisite, and it's just like poetry. And in this story, we follow twins Iris and Floyd, who they're on the hunt for this puma. They're looking to get the bounty. Everyone's hunting this puma who is starting to kill people in the Highlands. And Iris starts to become affected by the nature in the Highlands. She's only lived in the lowlands before, but as she gets into the Highlands, she becomes really affected by the beauty of the landscape. And I started to become quite affected by the descriptions in this book. The writing was just magnificent in the way it was described. Arnott's writing is absolutely exquisite. There was one particular phrase, and this was the last paragraph except for the last line, and this is not a spoiler. And this is just an example of Robbie Arnott's writing. Iris let the sound of them wash over her like weak rain. She closed her eyes. She tasted the clean air. She summoned into her mind the endless light of the Highland stars. It was such a beautiful, beautiful story. It was right up there. The only reason I think it was just shy of a 5-star for me was because as I was reading it, I thought we were going somewhere and we didn't quite get there. So it was like, we're like 4.75 stars. But that's me. I'm not a book reviewer, and I don't do this professionally, so that was just my feelings on this particular book. But I love it. I would recommend it. I think a number of you in North America were trying to get hold of this after I shared it last time, and I think you have to wait a little while to get a hard copy, maybe like mid next year. But you can get like a electronic edition. Exquisite. If you can't get hold of this now, maybe try one of Robbie Arnott's back listed books, like Limberlost is definitely one, or The Rain Heron. He has at least 3 other ones that you could probably get to in the meantime. Now, one I don't have with me right now because I have loaned it to someone is James. This is one that I truly did enjoy reading. I waited a long time to read it, and it is definitely on my top books for 2024 because this book was a riot of laughter. It smacked you in the face with racial injustice. And it was just this huge adventure of a man trying to figure out a way to get his family back to him. There were times when I couldn't stop laughing. I was just laughing out loud. And there were times when my heart was breaking, absolutely breaking. And when I closed the book at the end, I burst into tears. I was so proud of James. At the end of the story, I was so proud of Percival Everett for what he had accomplished with this story, for this retelling of what Mark Twain had done with The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. And I held off reading it for a number of months after it came out because it's one of those books where I didn't want to rush. Well, I didn't want to rush into it, but when I started reading it, I wanted to make sure I had the time and the luxury of being able to read it. I could read it over a weekend if I wanted to, because you can only read a book for the first time once, and I knew that with this one, and it was getting such great accolades. It was most definitely a 5-star read for me. It's added another author to my must-read author list. I want to find more books by Percival Everett to read. There is most definitely a nature theme in my 2024 books, because another one of my favourite books of 2024 is Northwoods by Daniel Mason. I read this back in January 2024, so the fact this is still up there is saying something. And I realise I've said through this entire video I'm not into magical realism, but this has magical realism in it, so I guess maybe I'm eating my own words. So Northwoods is the story of it's essentially the story of a cabin in the woods in New England, and it's the story of that cabin along with the generations of people that come into contact with that cabin over centuries. While it does have a little bit of that magical realism element, the nature writing is what really got me in this. I know I love nature writing, I really do, but my experience with it to date has been a lot of British nature writing. So when I read this one, which is American nature writing, it was it was something I hadn't really read much before, so it really was interesting for me. And it was sublime, absolutely beautiful. But this book is also a thriller, it is a romance, it is a mystery, it has everything in it. Every chapter is a new person, couple, family that is in this cabin in a new generation. And I absolutely adored it. I'm so pleased that it is still up there, even after all the other books that I could have put in its place. Anne of Green Gables, Pride and Prejudice, Bambi, Shadows of Winter Robins. There are other books I would have put on this list, but this is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. I loved it. I think I want to read it again. And I ended up getting another book with the US cover, because the like UK Australian cover was just, I really loved the cat on the front. Love it. And that's what you do when you love a book, right? You get the edition that you want to keep for years. And I have some other Daniel Mason books that I want to get to soon. And the last book that I have on this list, there is no particular order in this, I'm not ranking it in any order. I do not think I could pick a favourite out of this list of books, but the last one that I have is 84 Charing Cross Road by Helene Hanff. This is perhaps the most delightful, uplifting, heartwarming book that I have read this year. It is a book for fans of literature, for people who love to read about friendship, for people who have an appreciation of the post-World War II years and a much slower time in history. The writing and the wit is excellent, and it makes me very sad that a lot of our communication has been relegated to emojis now. Some people don't know how to construct a sentence, let alone speak a sentence. It's a shame that our grandchildren or our grandchildren's children won't have a similar time capsule for them of our relationships. And the communication we do have is editable. You know, it can be adjusted and edited on email quite easily. So I think that's why this is such a special little book, is that it's a bygone era. It's a time that is no more. I found it really fascinating to watch the friendships in this book grow and deepen as time went on. And Helene Hanff's writing, there is 2 books in here. There is the 84 Charing Cross Road, which is a collection of letters, which were letters that went back and forth from Helene Hanff to the staff, the people of 84 Charing Cross Road, which was a antiquarian secondhand used bookstore in London. And then the second book is The Duchess of Bloomsbury Street, which is when Helene Hanff goes to London for the launch of her book, which is the 84 Charing Cross Road, the selection of letters. And it is just so beautiful, so well done. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I got this beautiful edition from Slightly Foxed, which I love. It is just one of their plain foxed editions. which is just this little cloth bound edition. And it's a delightful experience reading this. I love these little books. I actually made an entire video reviewing this book as well, so maybe that's an indication of what books are going to be my top ones of the year. Is the ones that I do a big review on are the ones that might be at the top of the list. So these are the books that made my 2024 very, very special, very sweet. They added so much to my life. I hope that you have enjoyed these recommendations. I hope that maybe you have picked up some of these. I think a lot of you have commented that you enjoy that I have been reading books that you don't see other people reading, that you don't see a lot of other people talking about a lot, you know, those ones that are top of the pops essentially. And I think that just comes from the fact that I'm reading what I want to read at the time. I'm trying not to be led by trends, because I have found in the past that they just kind of lead nowhere for me. But I do find that sometimes just going with your gut is the best way to do it with books, you know, whether it's the cover, whether it's the blurb, whether it's a recommendation. Sometimes you just got to go with your gut. And a lot of these were going with my gut. This was a magnificent year for me. I read 61 books so far this year. My goal was 50. This just makes me so happy. This was exceptionally good. I want to take a moment to thank you so much for joining me on this year, my first year on YouTube. It has been a wild ride, and I'm so grateful that you've been here. To everyone that has commented and subscribed, thank you so much. It has been a pure joy communicating with you in the comments below. To people that don't comment, I see you still. I am not a commenter on other YouTubers. I am I just lurk in the background and watch. I still see you, and I am so grateful you are here as well. Thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun, and you have really been a solid piece of my year, a really strong anchor in what has been a tumultuous year for me. 2025 is coming. I am excited for it. I'm excited for what it is going to bring. And on that note, this is my last video for the year, for 2024, and I will be back on around about the 14th or 15th of January. So I'll take about 3 weeks off. But I hope to come back with some great, to tell you all about the books that I have read over our summer holidays here, and also to share with you some reading goals that I have for 2025 going on. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a wonderful Merry Christmas wherever you are, or however you celebrate this time of year. Thank you again for being here, and I will see you in 2025. Bye.